July 13th, 2010. We're here with Bill Dowd at the MCC talking about some of his reflections on his career here. Bill, what did you teach here at the college?
I was hired as an instructor in social sciences. Okay. I had a broad background, mostly history, but a considerable amount of political science and sociology and psychology and a little bit of economics. But the assignment was primarily political science, and was for the next 20-some-odd years, primarily. Occasionally taught a history course, occasionally taught a sociology course. And, of course, at that time we were also experimenting with the Harvard plan, which was an attempt to integrate the social sciences. We never quite achieved that. I don't think Harvard did either. But we did for several years run 5-week units in the social sciences.
What year did you begin your career at the college?
I began here part-time on an adjunct basis, I think probably in 65, and then full-time in 69.
Okay. And in 65, 66, were you teaching somewhere else?
I was teaching in Manchester High School. Yeah, I taught there for 11 years, and teaching here a night course.
In the first year or so, were the classes held at the high school?
Yes, they were. Yeah, they were held at the high school.
What do you remember about the mid to late 60s in terms of the academics or...
Well, I was thinking about that last couple of days in anticipation of kind of question. And I saw Jim Tatro recently at a fundraising event. And he asked me about the this. See, initially the town, it was a town operated community college. It was not state operated by the town, and there was quite a bit of division, not only in the town at large, but among the teachers, because they saw, and correctly so, that this would be diverting monies from K through 12 program, and there was a lot of anxiety about that. So there was tension among the teachers who were supporting the development of the community college system, particularly in Manchester, and those who were fearful that it would divert short funds from the system. And approximately the same time, the teachers' organization, the Manchester Education Association, had split. So there was an emerging Federation of Teachers unit, and that seemed to pretty much correspond to the support of the college and those who were not opposed to it, but opposed to it as being funded locally. Yeah. The AFT was much more pro-college, much more far-sighted, and had more of a political view of the consequence of the community college. And also had a disproportionate number of male teachers as opposed to the association, which were women teachers. You know. So, and I remember as active in the AFT that we wrote letters to the editor, and generally, when not given an opportunity, would support the emerging community colleges. Guys like Bob Vader and Jay Steger and myself, who all taught at the high school at that time. Now, concerning the early years at the college, the most important remembrance that I have is of the energy of the faculty. And that is not to in fact, it was only possible because of the administrative leadership in Fred Lowell. And the faculty brought in other like-minded people who were professional teachers. We had a lot of high school teachers, professional high school teachers of some experience, some of which were taking pay cuts, myself included, to come here. And Fred gave us a lot of room, a lot of room to develop curriculum, a lot of room to experiment in that area, a lot of room to negotiate the transferability. So it was a pretty exciting time. And I think the energy that was contagious, of course, but it was founded on the notion, the idea that what we were doing was really historic. We were opening opportunities to 40% of the population that historically had been denied. And of course that meant opportunities for minority students and for women. So we were aware, very much aware of the political consequences of the college and the political purposes. And we were also confident that we as a faculty were good teachers. And we were not interested in research except as it affected our teaching. We were devoted to the craft of teaching and respected each other's different unique strategies. There was not a correct methodology. What was correct was what worked for you and for the student. So there was a lot of mutual respect in that regard, and it was just a very exciting time, very exciting for us all.
Now, in late 60s and certainly early 70s, you had students who were probably coming back from Vietnam, as well as students who were on educational deferments. Well, it must have been an interesting mix in the class. Yeah,
it was. I did a little classroom experiment one time. I'm not sure whether it was the right thing to do or not, and looking back on it, but we were doing something a separate but equal principles and civil liberties. And there were three guys from Vietnam formerly from Vietnam, that when they came into the classroom, you knew they had smoked their lunch. And so one day I asked them if they would not sit with the rest of the class, but just a little bit apart from the rest of the class. So they were indignant, and said, "What are you talking about? Why do we have to sit?" I said, "Hey, you guys are older, more mature. I just like to see if you set aside here a little bit, And of course, the point was separate, but equal is separate is not equal in the same classroom. And I think that point was well made. Yeah, it was an interesting time. Yeah, and interesting enough that in the early days, the ones who were coming back were pretty much anti-war. Yeah, and that was always a discussion among the circle that I hung out with. Vader and Steger and Lipshires and others. What should be our role in this? And our role, I think, for the most part, was to respect the rights of students to demonstrate anti-war and respect the rights of those students who wanted to support the war. And our job was to keep an orderly student involvement. And I think we did that for the most part.
Now, as I recall, in the spring of 1970, the National Guard shot and killed four students at Kent State, and there was a general strike in American universities. What was the impact here?
I don't know what the impact here was, to tell you the truth. I remember, discussing it. It obviously came up, and tried to present as objective a response as possible, and to make clear the difference between an emotional response and an objective response. Because there was a lot of not so much defense. I guess it was a lot of apologetic commentary for the guardsmen, that they were being taunted, and that most of the demonstrators at Kent State were not Kent State students at all, but were outside agitators. And whether or not that should have made a difference or not. So I think it was, at least in my experience, it was presented pretty much as an objective that we're responding here to the event without really knowing full, and without having much sympathy for the kids who did this firing, who initially did the firing, and I know one of the social teachers, I think Ms. Daigle, used it to identify collective behavior, used it in the classroom as effectively. But I don't remember it being a very significant event in the life of the college.
Now, you mentioned Dr. Lowe as being instrumental during the early years of the college. Yeah. Who are some of the other people who you worked with and had a big impact?
Well, of course, Jimmy Tatro. Jim was always for expansion and outreach. And if Jim had his way, we would be teaching courses in the lounges of the apartment buildings in the greater Hartford area. And we were teaching in the schools and the high schools throughout the area, and Vernon and East Hartford. and I think he also negotiated contracts with Aetna and Pratt. So we were out, which was consistent with the philosophy at that time of the community college. Was to reach out and to provide opportunities for people who previously did not have those opportunities. And the people that I associated with in the union people were active in the AAUP, and also other spin-offs from that. AAUP was not as politically conscious as AFSCME was, for instance. We affiliated with it. We're Lipshires and Tatro and Steger and who else there? Vader, of course, was very much a dominant political figure, but in terms of Fred Lowe, one of the things that I remember about Fred was that the conversation didn't change when Fred came to the room. It was the same conversation, the same points, the same emphasis, which was remarkable. Remarkable, I think.
You mentioned the union. Were you involved in the early creation of the Four Seasons?
Oh, yes, yeah. Not on the state level so much. Sid and Bob did pretty much the organizing on the state level. I was active locally and did participate in some of the state stuff. I was a state legislative committee chairman, did lobbying for the Four Cs for 4 or 5 years, or whatever. But it was a very, very exciting time. The first dozen years or so of the college, and we were, our commitment was reaffirmed by the success of our students. We were getting students with scholarships in Wesleyan and Yale. UConn did an assessment and showed that the community college transfer students had the highest academic ranking in the college, even higher than the veterans, which was at that time the highest student group. So that kind of reaffirmed our success that we were feeling.
Could you talk a little about the facilities that you worked in during those first couple of years? Facilities were never a big deal to me. Nor to pretty much not to anybody that I was had close relationships with. Really didn't care what the facility was, Although when we did go to Aetna or something, we'd ask them, "Could you put a blackboard in here?" Especially poor Nick Costa. I don't know if you know Nick Costa. Nick Costa wrote everything on every board he could find, and then had to erase it before he got through. I used to sit in on Nick's classes and I couldn't believe how he could write continuously for an hour and 20 minutes sometimes. Wrote and lectured at the same time. So we did need that kind of facility. But we were not I hope I'm not offending anybody here, but we were really not into the technology, educational technology. A blackboard and some chalk. Sometimes want an overhead projector, if you had slides or something you wanted to use. But location and facility was not the important thing. The important thing was to reach as many people as we could. I understand that Dr. Lowe had Friday night faculty meetings?
There are faculty meetings on Friday night, in the basement of the, whatever that is, their building, the O'Neill building there. They were kind of lively meetings because they were preceded by a dinner and cocktails at someplace in town anyway. So they were lively meetings. But we shouldn't. The relationship with Dr. Lowe was always a very upfront relationship, and nobody hedged anything, which speaks well for him.
You had almost 30 years here.
Right.
The adjunct service.
Right. I was thinking that either 29 years, I think, altogether.
So what changes did you see over those 3 decades?
Well, of course, I haven't had much to do with here for the last 15 years because I live in Florida, and I'm here only in the summer. but the last several years that I was teaching, one of the things that I began to note was criticism of methodology. I was always uncomfortable with that. Of course, I was department chair, social science department chair, so I did a lot of evaluating. And I found, and among some of the newer faculty, not necessarily younger, there was a commitment pretty much that their method was the method to be used for our students. And that ran counter to my experience, which was that all roads that lead to Rome are good roads. So I was that annoyed me when I would hear that and from faculty. And the other thing that I think changed is that some of the younger faculty were really not committed politically. They didn't understand what the significance of what we were doing. We had opened the door to about 40% of the population that previously had been denied access, and that even if the students withdrew from class, didn't complete the class, they had benefited from the 8 or 10 weeks or whatever they spent in the class, and probably would be successful the next time through. And we realized that many of the students who failed or withdrew, because we believe in this non-punitive grading things, after progressively, or non-punitive grading, where you would try to convince the student to withdraw prior to a punitive grade, enough grade. And many of those students had learned more than the A students from where they began the course. Their base was so low that they had actually learned a great deal more and would be successful coming in now with a new base a second time around. And they did. And those ideas were just, it didn't seem to be, and I'm not being critical. This was another generation. We're talking, 20 years or more later, and so there was not the political energy that was available to us at the beginning of the college's development. So they didn't have that kind of approach to students. And they had more. And I think some of them were interested in working in community college to build a Vita. We really wanted to teach at Trinity or UConn or Wesleyan. They really this wasn't their end of their goal to the end here. This was really just sort of a stepping stone. But good people, good teachers, but just not quite the same enthusiasm and the same kind of commitment, and you really couldn't share with them the same values that were shared among the 30 or 40 people who really, began the place.
Do you have any amusing anecdotes that you can relate about individuals or students, faculty that you dealt with over the years?
Well, I don't know about amusing anecdotes. I do remember Nick Costa came to me one day, and one of the exciting things when you're writing curriculum for the first time is that you're really writing it. I mean, you're looking around for different materials. And Nick came to me with a textbook written by Lipson, who's head of the political science department at Berkeley. And he and I both thought it was outstanding. But it didn't conform to the traditional introductory course at all. So we said, what the hell, we're going for it anyway. So Nick actually left that year. I think he went to Middlesex first and then Greater Hartford, or maybe Greater Hartford, Middlesex. But anyway, he and I used it, and we would talk about it from time to time. We both had more letters from students relating to the value of that particular approach than any other course. So it was a unique thing. And eventually we just wrote it the way it was. We didn't conceal it in the catalog anymore. We had 2 political science courses, introductory courses, and that one was a different one. And as far as I know, it was even though it was not a course that was available at the other state colleges, was readily transferred as credit. Yeah. other amusing kind of things. Well, every day was amusing. Every day was. I do a lot of mentoring now for the last 15 years in schools in Florida, high school students in Florida, and what I try to tell them is that a job that they look forward to every day has enormous value, and that's comes from our own experience.
Could you look back and point to something that you would consider the highlight of your career?
The highlight of my career. Probably not. I probably can't think of any single event that would be the highlight of the career. Yeah.
What? Imagine that you were talking to an individual who had just been hired to start their academic career at MCC, 2010.
And fired from here?
No, someone, a recent hire, someone who's out of grad school, moving from another college, and is going to start teaching at MCC for the first time in the fall of 2010. What would you tell that individual?
Well, I think they like any other teaching, you've got to take the students from where they are, not from some predetermined place, because if they were at that predetermined place, they would be at one state college system. They would not be coming here unless this is an economic issue, which is. I'm surprised that we don't have half a dozen more community colleges in the state because of the potential demand here for them. But I would, tell them to do identify where, and give them some history. I've taught for 14 years at Eastern, and 4 years at Hartford, and 4 or 5 years at Hartford College for Women, and taught the same courses, the same textbook, taking the same tests, and the highest grades were always MCC grades, always. And the lowest, of course, were also MCC grades. We had the greatest. We always had kind of an inverted bell here, unlike Eastern, for instance, which was a perfect bell curve. I mean, you had 60% of the class within 10-point range of each other in the 70s. And tell them that's the nature of the student population, and you've got a job to do. You've got to somehow or other challenge those who come here with some significant background, and at the same time move those with the very low into an acceptable passing grade. So it's really a teaching challenge, an educational challenge, and they've got to be committed to that. And there's no I don't think there's a given formula. We all come with our own personalities and strengths, and we ought to exploit those in teaching. That's what I would emphasize anyway, is the challenge of teaching and the nature of the student population.
Is there anything else you want to add or discuss?
You're doing very well, Bob. I don't know.
Chuck may have questions.
Chuck may have questions. Yeah. No, I'm just thrilled to have participated in the development and growth of the college.
About Vader and Lipshires, did you talk to them about that before?
Vader and Sid Lipshires?
Yeah, your association.
Yeah, they were even more political than I was. They were really and good teachers in a different way. Sid was much more intellectually challenged, and Bob had of course great dynamics and energy. So they're both good teachers and very active in, as you know, remember, and teacher unionism, and in also enhancing faculty political strength by participating with other employee state unions, merging with them. So the great advantage in being part of the State Labor Council, break from traditional AAUP style politics. And we're leaders in that.
Good. Okay.
Yep.
Good?
We're done.
We're a wrap?
That's a wrap.